Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's session on managing subscriptions effortlessly in Microsoft Business Central. My name is Justin McCool. I'm one of the partner sales managers here at Binary Stream, and with me I've got Nick Petrolini. He's one of our solution consultants. I'm pretty much managing the relationship between our partners and really facilitating the sales cycle with our customers, partners, and making sure that everyone's getting ultimately what they need. And then I like to call Nick the brains of the operation with respect to kind of helping support the sales effort, really, helping with demos, all the pre-sales, technical questions and things like that. Nick, do you want to give a quick introduction at least, a quick hello?
Sure. Hi, everybody. Nick here, as Justin said, solution consultant with Binary Stream over the last few years, and specifically looking at our subscription billing suite within Business Central. I have some experience as a CPA and public accounting practice as well, and I'm hoping that everyone's going to like what we have to show for you today.
That's great. Thanks a lot, Nick. Guys, today we've got about an hour session. I'll spend about 10 or so minutes in slides, just kind of setting some context, and then I'll shift over to Nick, who's actually going to kind of provide everyone with a closer look at managing a billing schedule within Business Central. Really what our product brings to the table, how it allows you to manage kind of that recurring revenue stream of your business more efficiently, effortlessly, as we say in the title here. And just to set some context on who we are, so Binary Streams, and we kind of been an ISV for almost 25 years now. We very closely align with Microsoft. All we do is create add-on extensions or solutions for the Microsoft set of ERPs. And for us, that would be GP, Business Central, and Finance and Operations. We are a gold partner. We pretty much participate in most of the Microsoft programs that exist today, Inner Circle members and winners in the past, Partner of the Year finalists, et cetera, et cetera. Really not that important with respect to the accolades, but just I want to make sure everyone understands the close relationship we have with Microsoft. We've been working with them, again, very closely, especially in the last few years around specifically subscription billing. Some pretty exciting things happening, I think, just with the industry, with the global economy and things like that, as everyone is transitioning to what seems to be a subscription billing environment, or some portion of their business anyway. But we've been doing subscription billing for at least 15 of those 20 or so years. All our solutions are published on apps, whether it's Business Central or Finance and Operations. We're one of their preferred solutions. And why that's important to you is that because we're one of their preferred solutions, we've got to make sure that everything we do within our extensions are lockstep with everything happening in the ERP. So there will never be a situation where what we're doing in our extensions are out of sync with what's happening in the ERP. That's just part of the relationship we have and kind of the requirements of being a preferred solution. We've got over 2,000 customers, growing very quickly, over 25 countries. The TM Group is one of our platinum partners, so pleasure to be with you today on behalf of their team. And just wanted to make sure I shared some kind of information on who we are ultimately. So we're going to be talking about the subscription economy today. And really, if you think of Forbes themselves, really they believe that 87% of companies will be migrated to some type of subscription business model by 2030. So I mentioned earlier, this has really kind of been one of the biggest growth areas in our company over the last week. If you ask most folks about Binary Stream, they'd probably think of us in many ways for our multi-entity solution. But really over the last few years, obviously, this has been able to complement us. We're actually working with Microsoft on the finance and operations, and our extension is part of their core product. Just, everything around our business and just the economy in general just seems to be shifting to what is a subscription-based model in some capacity or not. 4.6 times company-led models. What I guess this ultimately means is 4.6 growth for companies that have a subscription-based model in their existence within the company. Anyone that you see out there, and that's, I think, why the economy is shifting and companies are shifting to some sort of model because of the growth potential that exists within that environment. Some of the, I guess, ultimately industries we work in, this is probably the biggest five that we see, and I think that exist out there. Retail, manufacturing, healthcare, logistics, and technology are some of the many that we have customers around and work with on a constant basis. Here, $31.7 billion is the size of the service-based ERP market, and by a huge chunk of, I guess, revenue within that space is out there. And I think it's part of kind of what we're doing to help manage that within companies we work with. So Binary Stream, I do sincerely believe that we have become and continue to be, subscription management experts, right? We really work hard and making sure that most of what we do is, bringing value consistently to our customers. We're constantly improving. Things that you'll notice about our solution specifically is when we build our solutions, they're embedded right into the ERP. In this case, we're going to be focusing on Business Central today, but you're going to realize that everything we're doing is piggybacking off the native ERP, so that when you're creating a schedule, deferring the revenue on that schedule, that it's all basically being invoiced and being kind of piggybacking off what's happening in the ERP. As I mentioned, 230% growth in subscription management for us. We've got a lot of cross-industry expertise within subscription. So Nick is one of our team members, but we've got a significant group of, whether it's our professional services team, our development team, that are constantly enhancing the product by working with our partners and customers to do that. I think you're in good shape to kind of help out or allow us to help you with managing that portion of your business, so to speak. So 15 years of experience and licensed by Microsoft, as I mentioned earlier. Obviously that's in the finance and operations. There is no plans at present to do that within Business Central, but there is conversation certainly happening, but no indication of where those will go in future. And then obviously connectivity with other ISVs, right? Within Business Central, within subscription billing, there's a constant, balance between what we're doing and then balancing that with what the other ISVs are doing within Business Central. And we work with the majority of the others out there, making sure that our products are supported as well. And our development teams are working constantly at making sure that happens. Again, talking about subscription billing suite today, I'll just do a quick overview of the product and what you're ultimately trying to accomplish. So if you think about subscription billing, it's really a comprehensive suite of solutions that's designed to cover kind of every step in that billing cycle, whether it's the bill or the actual order or what have you, quote, that starts outside of Business Central. We're going to provide the opportunity to manage that, appropriately. There's a lot of ways that we can do that. There's a lot of different types of billing scenarios that exist, whether that's usage-based or tiered or milestone or many others exist. We have the tools in place in the solution to help support that. Compliance is obviously a big issue with ASC and 606 and IFRS 15. And our solution really completely aligns with those standards and really compatible, or, we can show you that in the demo. But ultimately, if you have those requirements, our subscription billing product will support those, of course. And then reporting. Obviously, it's not really much use to have a great management of the information of the billing without the outputs, right? Without the appropriate reporting to make sure that your forecasting tools, your churn, everything that really relates to your subscription billing kind of day-to-day operations are giving you the outputs you need. People can make informed business decisions at an appropriate time. And that's a big part of what we do. So many different ways of doing that. We've created many different reporting, packages, whether it's just native BC or through BI, or we work very closely with Solver and creating much of that reporting that exists as well. Our modules themselves, if you think about what they look like, there's really two major components of how we manage a billing requirement, ultimately, I'll call it. So we have one portion that's called our Advanced Recurring Contract Billing, ARCB. And this is where the inception of the contract starts. This is where we're capturing everything about the customer, the partner, if there's a partner or district-based business before. Within that contract, we have milestone, usage-based, revenue split, all the different types of complex billing that exist are going to be kind of incorporated into that advanced contract billing piece. From there, we have the what we call the multi-element revenue allocation is kind of an extension of what we're doing in ARCB. And that provides that compliance, as I mentioned earlier, with ASC 606. That's obviously very important to most people. Or the revenue reallocation, the fact that there's a certain way that contract needs to be handled to make sure you're compliant with ASC 606. That becomes a part of ARCB, and something Nick will show you as we give you a closer look here or talk through. And then in most cases, depending on requirements, there's obviously a deferral requirement, right? A revenue recognition portion. That could be straight line, that could be milestone based, that could be event based. It could be many different things that exist, whether that's, recognize the revenue immediately or deferring that on an appropriate schedule. We've got you covered there with that ARED piece. And really, for the most part, those are the two major pieces which allow us to really accomplish what we're doing in subscription billing. I'm more of a visual. What you're looking at here is kind of what I kind of always think of the process flow within the subscription billing process, right? So as I mentioned earlier, data sources externally, we work with, frankly, anything. With the APIs we've created, we allow any customer to bring in kind of the information outside if needed from the ERP, in this case, Business Central, and allow it to come into the billing schedule. You're bringing in the information needed to make sure that we can create those contracts. And then you can see the flow of information right into the contract and basically how that's invoiced on a recurring basis in a mass volume or specific to a contract. And then obviously the recurring portion of it is either transacted and recognized either immediately, or as you can see there, flows into kind of an ongoing revenue recognition schedule as needed. We'll get into more of that. But the key, guys, that you want to realize here, I think that you'll realize pretty quickly as Nick shows you the product, is that all this is happening in Business Central. We don't sit as an extension outside of Business Central. It's really sitting in Business Central, that really everything we're doing, again, as I mentioned, is just happening within the ERP. It becomes very fluid, very common to most people that are familiar with Business Central anyway. So if you think of common pain points, the customers we work with, this is a good list of what we're typically trying to solve for, right? Obviously, a big one being ASC 606. If you have a situation where there's mid-contract amendments, so to speak, so price adjustments, hold, terminations, discounts, we've got obviously a way and really can manage those very efficiently. Again, there's some it doesn't really necessarily have to be, we work with very simple billing schedules, but we also have the opportunity, or the ability, I should say, to work within those complex needs, whether that's a tiered, milestone, usage-based, or metered, where it's coming out from an external system and you're billing that on a monthly, annual, et cetera. And then min-max limits. I mean, really, there's most of the billing scenarios that exist out there today we've worked with in some capacity or another. Forecasting and reporting, like I mentioned, a big part of what we're trying to solve for. And then, as you mentioned earlier about the deferral side or the revenue recognition side, most of our customers that come to us initially are usually doing this outside in some type of spreadsheet or external system. What we try to do is obviously bring that in system so that you get that, consistent, ability to manage that and then report on it accordingly. Understand where your business is at, how to make better informed decisions, and really kind of focus on that revenue associated to the recurring side of your business. Without further ado, let me introduce Nick. Nick will kind of take us through a billing schedule today, walk through exactly. I mean, we've got about 40 minutes now left. He's going to have to rush through some of this, but he'll do the best job he can. I know he does. And you'll see at least how a billing schedule works within Business Central. Nick, do you want to take it away for us?
Yes, absolutely. Thanks, Justin.
Thanks, Nick.
Okay, right now I'm pulling up my Business Central environment. And as Justin just mentioned a minute ago, everything that our solution introduces to the environment is fully embedded within, so that you're not having to have any third-party software running in the background. And you can just search for any screens of interest in our solution just right in the Business Central search bar here. So as an example, if I search up my billing schedules, you'll see all my different screens related to those billing schedules and setup of those come up, just as they would if you were to search for a native Business Central screen or function there. And so what's that to say is that, it's really, the learning curve is a lot less steep than learning a brand new system from scratch when maybe your users are already used to working within a Business Central environment. It really simplifies any integrations that need to take place, because our once installed subscription billing suite is already going to plug into all of your sub ledgers and general ledger for the purposes of posting entries, as well as even from a forecasting perspective, generating reports out of those different accounts as well. For today, as Justin mentioned, I'll take you through sort of a standard billing scenario, starting with what we call our billing schedules, which is where we're going to determine which items are being billed and what frequency they're being billed for, and ultimately what's going to be invoiced on during each billing period to the end user. And we'll follow that through to the revenue recognition rules around that, in the case of prepaids or something along those lines where maybe that revenue has to be deferred over a period of time. We'll take you through that as well, and finish off with some examples of some of the reporting that we include within the licenses for our solution, right? And I'm not going to get into really any of this setup, but for the most part, all of this is configurable depending on the different requirements for your users. But if there are any questions around setup, happy to answer those at a later date through interaction with Justin or myself. So what I've pulled up here, and you'll notice I did that from a fast tab due to my role in Business Central, is my billing schedule list. And ultimately, all this is going to be is a comprehensive list of all of my open contracts with my customers. Now, within here, you can see, of course, a snapshot of, some of the high level parameters around these contracts, such as start date and end date, what's going to be my standard billing frequency, whether it's active or closed, as well as what's my next invoice date here. And some of those factors can be managed if I go to select a new one through these billing schedule groups. Now, similar to kind of your posting groups within Business Central, if you will, these billing schedule groups are, can consist of different types of contracts that you may regularly enter into with your various customers. You can almost think of these as sort of different default templates that maybe you want to start building a contract off of, and maybe that differs a little bit in terms of your billing frequency. Maybe you have some that are monthly and some that are weekly, for an example. You could also have, whether the standard is, just flat pricing period to period, or if there's a variable component based on a usage-based item or a consumption-based item, where the more that the customer uses, such as, data or something like that, in the case of a ISP, then we can manage that through these billing schedule groups here. Now, for today's demo, I'm not going to create a new one. I already have one. I'm sort of started at least and actually build a period or two out of this, just to show you kind of the full complement of our solution here. So what I've opened up again is an already ongoing contract. If we just walk through the header information here, of course, that's where you're going to see, who's my customer. You'll have your unique identifier for the contract number here, which is my ARCB50 up here. I also have, of course, my start date and end date. And ultimately, that end date is going to be automatically calculated based on my frequency, which I've chosen as monthly. But if I open that back up, you can see we have a variety of different frequencies, from daily all the way down to annually, and even we can add one-time items as well. And since I've identified the 24 periods included in this contract, of course, it's going to do the calculation of 24 months for me to get a 2-year long contract here. Now, that's not to say that we can't add time to this contract at a later date in the event maybe your customer would like to extend their contract, or even in the case that by default your contracts auto renew until a user actually calls and terminates the contract explicitly, in which case we've actually added this feature, which is our auto renew toggle here. And basically just by clicking that on, now past this 7/31/2025 date, it's going to continuously bill on a month-to-month basis until someone actually comes in here and terminates this contract. Okay. We also have the ability to prorate any partial period. In the case, maybe you're starting mid-month and a user of yours wants to align their billing date to the first of the month, for simplicity's sake. Well, that's no problem within Subscription Billing Suite here, because we can add this prorate partial period, toggle that on, and now align that to a specific date using this alignment date field here. And now, start brand new on the first of the next month, even though maybe we're entering into this on the 15th or the 20th of the current month. Just some high level options there in the header. And now we'll get into the line item specifically, and I'll go through some options on how to manage each of these as well. Okay. In my case here, I have 4 lines in this contract. Now, that's not to say that there's any limit to a contract. You can have, hundreds of lines, even potentially thousands of lines in a single contract as you continuously add these. But important to note is that these billing schedules actually, as I mentioned before, because we're embedded within Business Central, they're pulling directly from your item listing within Business. There's no need to keep a completely separate list of, recurring billing items or anything like that. We can basically configure each of the items already existing in a Business Central environment or already being input as an implementation for a new Business Central environment, and essentially just add some configuration around some default recurring billing parameters for these. So if we start with the top, what I have here is just a standard licensing cost. And the way I have this structured is a standard billing type, which just means it's going to follow a flat rate depending on the number of units that are sold each billing period. Right? You'll see it's a flat unit price of $110 per month. I've sold the customer 5 licenses, so I have a recurring billing amount of $550. Pretty easy, right? If we go into our billing schedule details here, this is where we're going to first see the power of this billing schedule come into play. And that's where we can see this list of all of my future billing periods based on the length of the contract that we denoted in the header and what we're expecting to bill for each of those periods. And you'll see my amounts here for each of these periods. And I've actually done a price adjustment on this specific one, which we'll get into in just a second here. But before we get into that, you'll see I've actually already billed for the first 2 periods of this contract as well. Now, if we go into one of those posted sales invoices, of course, we do have a link as you continue to bill through this contract. You'll have a link to the various sales invoices that get posted out of this. And again, the beauty of this solution is that these are just standard sales invoices within Business Central. What we're really presenting to our users as value is a engine to create these sales invoices based on some preliminary parameters that are denoted on the billing schedule and really active management of that billing schedule in the cases that changes get made. And the last thing I'll say on this screen is that all of these future periods, they're not going to affect your future books. And by saying that, what I mean is that no future periods are going to be opened at the time that a billing schedule detail list like this gets created. It's only going to hold this as a reference for your users and for Business Central so that when the time comes to actually bill for that next month, in my case, when I'm doing my October, month-end billing cycle, it's going to pull from this to actually input onto the sales invoice that gets posted. Okay, and so let's talk about this little change in my unit price here as well. And what's happened there is that I've actually utilized an additional feature within my billing schedule here. And that's this price adjustment field here. So if I open that up on my licenses, in my case, what I've done is I've actually said, okay, at the beginning of October, what I want to do is apply a 10% increase in price, right? This is a really powerful tool in the case you do, annual price adjustments, which I've seen from some of our users, or if there's just a scheduled increase at some given time where the price adjustment needs to be accounted for right at the beginning of the contract, or even halfway through the contract, or any other time really where you've noted that there needs to be a price adjustment applied, whether it's an increase or a discount, which we can toggle on through this. And just by denoting that and pressing adjust price, well, now I've actually increased that unit price by 10% on that given date. So it's a really quick tool to manage either at a line by line level, whether you want a price adjustment to take place at a given date, or you can do it also at the entire contract level from just the top ribbon here as well. So a really neat tool there. But let's talk about some other ways that we can bill for either visitor items out of this contract. Now you'll notice I have a bit of a different setup for my installation services underneath my licenses here. And the difference comes in this billing type field, where instead of standard, I've selected the option to have it as usage based. Basically, now I've changed from, I want this flat amount to be billed each month in the case of my licenses, to now I want a completely variable amount month to month billed for these installation services based on the hours that have been consumed in each of those months. And that's why you'll see this kind of funny look of, zero quantity and a zero line amount here. And that's because all of that detail is going to be held within the billing details. So instead of a flat quantity from month to month, where, we saw with our licenses, it was 5 licenses per month. Now I have variable amounts month to month where I can say, as we continue through the engagement of my installation, maybe it's 3 hours one month and 10 hours the next month, and it will continuously calculate what's to be billed on each of those monthly invoices based on that quantity consumed. And an important thing to note here is that, of course, we don't want to have to, double up somebody's work in the case that they're, tracking this in a different software such as a CRM, which we commonly see, or some other project management software where they're tracking the amount of hours consumed or the amount of units consumed. We can use our API connections in order to integrate with that. An import process can take place, and that these are populated based on the updates that are posted in those various other sources, and that's something we commonly see here. And again, you'll see reference to the different invoices that actually were issued to the customers for these given dates and what that amount is for each of those invoices. And just some other quick features before we get into actually what a billing cycle looks like when we get to the billing date. We also can have physical items, of course. I have my equipment here where instead of a month-to-month basis of my billing frequency, of course, I only want to sell this equipment. I've identified this as a one-time item, and that's why you'll see that start date and end date as the same. Essentially, if we go into those billing schedule details, well, it's going to look really easy. If I go into the right one, there we go. And it's just got that one line, of course, which we haven't actually billed for yet. But you'll see that as just a quick example of how we can also utilize one-time items. And our last item here is a unique item in the sense that instead of month-to-month billing, I want to actually have this as a prepaid annual billing cycle. And that's where we're going to first see our deferral functionality kick in as well. So if I go to my annual support here, and again, I go to my billing details, again, we're going to see, of course, just the 2 periods worth of billing because it's a 2-year contract and it's an annual billing frequency for this item. Now, I've already billed for the first period here, but that won't matter for us in the next step here because now we can actually see we have a specific deferral template associated to this item here. In my case, because I've already billed for this, it's locked down my options to alter it. But you can see my template that I've applied in the sense that, of course, it's identified as a deferred item based on the fact that it's prepaid annually. I also have configured my different accounts to be posted to at the various stages of recognition of this particular item. Of course, I have my initial deferred accounts that are going to get posted to with deferred revenue, COGS, and if there's any discounts that I also need to defer, I can apply another account to post to that as well. And again, those are just going to link directly to your chart of accounts in your Business Central environment. That can be, completely configurable depending on the user and which accounts need to be posted to. And then on the flip side, as we continue to recognize the revenue and the costs associated with the sale of this item, you'll see my recognition accounts identified here on the right side. So that Business Central knows exactly which accounts to post to. Now down here, we'll see schedule type here as well. In my case, this is a straight line deferral for this item over a 1-year period, which is, again, you'll see that template denoted at the very bottom here. And so again, that's going to tell the system that for this $12,000 item, it needs to be split over a 12-month period on a straight line basis. And just by denoting which template we're using and which straight line versus event-based, which would be the other option, Business Central and our solution within Business Central is going to create the deferral schedule for this particular item as soon as we go ahead and post the sales invoice that contains this item on it. And we can have many different templates in the case, of course, this is a very simple example of a 1-year deferral process. You could have 2-year, 3-year, 5-year, 10-year. You could also have event-based where it's a milestone in the case where maybe you're doing percentage of completion. We've seen some construction companies, have to have that requirement where they're deferring things over a percentage of completion basis. We can also calculate that within the deferral schedule as you continue through the project and add to your costs associated to that project. We're really flexible in the different ways that we can manage that. And the goal there is really to save a lot of time in the actual processing of the sale of any deferrable items, as well as any recurring items that, are really quite simple in nature, but can lead to a lot of legwork from your accounting team in the sense they're having to create, basically the same invoice period to period, where we're going to take a lot of that load off of your accounting staff so that it can free up time for other, forecasting capabilities or other activities that might add value to the business. Before I go into invoicing, I just want to also identify a couple of quick tools that we can also, something that comes up fairly frequently is the ability to also apply minimums or maximums to a billing quantity in the case of a usage-based item like our installation services here, where maybe you've negotiated a minimum chargeable amount, or maybe the customer has negotiated a free quantity as well, where they get the first 5 hours free, or maybe there's a maximum, a capped amount. We also have the ability to apply tiered pricing. In the case of our licenses, for an example, maybe your first 5 licenses are sold at this $110 amount, and maybe as you continue to climb in your license count, they get kind of cheaper and cheaper on a per unit basis. Well, we can apply those tiers as well, where let's say, the next 5 licenses would be at a cost of $100, on and so forth. And it will do that calculation for you depending on the different quantities that are identified for each period. Now, we already talked about price adjustment, but we'll also talk about the ability to, of course, terminate this. We have kind of a quick terminate tool where you can identify if there's like a buyout amount, if there's a credit that needs to be associated with the termination, and things like that as well. Or if you don't want to go that extreme, if maybe you're just having a quick dispute with a customer, or for whatever reason you need to put the billing on hold for a particular billing schedule, we can also put it on hold, basically just pausing any invoicing from being generated out of this schedule. Okay, but for now, let's go ahead and get into the actual invoicing process and what that looks like. Now we can go ahead and create an invoice right out of this billing schedule by going up to the top ribbon here and creating my order and invoice. But I actually want to go in from a different way, because of the fact if I go in from that billing schedule, it's only going to provide me lines from that particular billing schedule. But where I really think the power of SBS shines is doing this as a batch process. I've gone into basically the same screen that invoice tab would have brought us to, which is our invoice creator, our schedule order invoice creator here. And here you can see many lines introduced to me. And what those are representative of are all of the lines that are ready to be billed based on the different frequencies and the different start dates of all of my open billing schedules within my Business Central environment here. That's going to, again, give you a really good access to a batch process to do all of your invoicing, or all of your recurring invoicing, that is, upfront for a particular. If I go to my cutoff date here of today's date, October 17th, here I can see all of those items that are ready to be billed for. And from just this screen alone, I can go ahead and select all of those lines that I want to bill for. And easily I could just select all and run all of my individual invoices just in this one batch. And what that means is that it's actually going to create a separate invoice for each unique billing schedule identifier here. For example, even if I go ahead and select all of these items from ARC B07 will be on a single invoice, and ARC B12 will be on a separate invoice as well. Now, in the case that you have multiple billing schedules open with the same customer, which is exactly what I have here, we can also say that I want to consolidate by customer. In the case your customer prefers just one single invoice at the end of each period, that's inclusive of all of their open contracts with you, we can toggle that function on and off as required. It's really, again, a flexible tool in creating your different invoices. And we don't just have the ability to create them out of this, we can also actually go directly to posting each of these invoices as well. If you're ready to go and post those, by all means, you can go ahead and do that. At which point, again, you're going to get that link back to the billing schedule that it was created out of. And in the billing schedule details, you'll also get a link to the posted sales invoice as well. Again, a really good tool for audit purposes, or end of month review, just to see where that source documentation is coming from, either from the invoice or from the billing schedule level. And we can even go as far as posting and sending these directly to your various customers as well. Now, once we get that billing done, and I've already billed out of there, you don't have to watch me generate a bunch of invoices. We're going to loop back to our deferral items now. In our case, that annual deferral item of $12,000. Once that gets billed to the customer and that sales invoice is posted within Business Central, that's going to automatically trigger our solution to create what's called a deferral schedule for that item. And these are going to look very similar to the billing schedule details that we looked at in the billing schedule. And you'll notice I have, hundreds of these in my environment. Again, you probably have hundreds or thousands of these ongoing at once, depending on the volume of business and the volume of deferred items that get sold. But you'll see for each item that has, that deferred toggle on and a template identified, these deferral schedules will get generated for each of those particular items. This is that $12,000 annual support item that links back to our billing schedule that we just looked at. So if I open that up, first glance, you'll see a snapshot of those different deferral templates that we set up and all of those deferred accounts that we're posting to as well. And below, what you'll see is, much like the billing schedule detail, a schedule of what's to be recognized for each period in terms of the revenue that can be recognized for this particular item. Again, in my case, it was a $12,000 item at a straight line 1 year methodology. Obviously, it's a very simple split of $1,000 per month. And as we continue through this year-long cycle, we can continue to recognize. I'll actually run the recognition process for our September period, because it looks like I'm a little late on that. But as I do that, you'll see a recognition journal entry number pop up here in this column, which is going to be representative of the journal entry that gets created just from me running this recognition process. I'll fix my cutoff date, and let's say I want to go up to the end of September, and we can go ahead and recognize that just by quickly running that recognition process here out of the deferral schedule. That journal entry is going to create it for me based on the parameters I've set up at the top here. Now, if we go into the link for that, we can see it's pulling that $1,000 out of my deferral account and recognizing it in my revenue account, that 42,100 there. Okay, so a really powerful tool, again, in just simplifying your standard recurring journal entry process so that your accountants aren't having to manually type in, this arbitrary data that, may ultimately never change. And in the case you have more complex deferral methods, it's also laying that out so that you can see the schedule for, something like a milestone item where maybe the deferral end date changes, maybe the completion of the obligation, the date of that may be variable depending on how quickly you're running through a project. We also apply that flexibility to your accounting processes by using these deferral schedules here. Now, in the case a correction needs to be made, of course, we also need to be able to recalculate these deferral schedules. So we actually have the ability to modify the schedule in the case that a change gets made and a modification has to get placed, or in case maybe they get credited for half the amount back and we have to apply a credit memo to this and have the future periods recalculated to reflect the change in what that recoverable revenue amount is. Then we have quick links to go ahead and do that, and it will automatically apply that credit memo to this deferral schedule and do that recalculation for you as well. And much like our invoice creator, we can also do all of that as a batch process for all of your open deferral schedules. Here you can see I have many features that have the word batch in them. But if I go to my batch recognition process, we can run that recognition process for all of my deferred items up to a specific cutoff date in one fell swoop. Hopefully that's a really, high-level snapshot of the different functionality between our two sides of subscription billing suite. Now you can see if I open again that screen up, you can see there's many different feature and pieces of functionality within this module where it's tough to get through all of that within an hour-long process here. But now that we're done with sort of the processing of a billing schedule all the way through a deferral schedule, the final thing I wanted to show was some of the reports that we have available with our licensing here. Quickly, I'm going to open up our report list here. You can see there's about 15 or so reports for the billing side. And a matching amount for our deferral side as well here. And these are going to consist of, all of your standard reports, whether it's a deferred revenue waterfall report on the deferral side, maybe it's just an MRR report on the ARC-B side. But maybe more impactful is we also have a variety of different Power BI reports, which we see commonly used within our users here. So if I open up an example, and this is just our standard MRR report here for you, here you can see an example of what I would say is a starting point for our users who are using Power BI and want a view to be able to see what their monthly recurring revenue is and break down, what's making that up, whether it's a new sale, upgrades or downgrades, ending MRR for each of those months, so that you can have, real-time visibility into what your revenue stream looks like. And again, the reason I say this is a starting point is because these are available right out of the box, but of course we can make modifications to these depending on the particular requirements of a specific user, so that, we're really being flexible in how these are presented, what kind of elements need to be tracked from an MRR perspective, what kind of filters need to be applied, and et cetera, all the way down the list. We're happy to work with your team in getting those requirements and making sure that whatever reports that we're building within Power BI are most effective for that particular user. And that's just an example of one. We have many of these different reports in Power BI. If I cycle through them again, that's always just going to be a starting point in the case that specific requirements are needed from your users. And so with that, thank you all for watching our presentation on SBS today, and I'll pass things back off to Justin for some closing comments.
Hey, thanks, Nick. Well, again, guys, thanks very much and great job, Nick, by the way, for having a look at subscription billing. I think hopefully you enjoyed what you saw. I know it was obviously very short, but as you see on the screen, we're happy to kind of answer any additional questions you might have. If there is further interest, here's a couple touch points with respect to subscription billing. As mentioned earlier, the listings on AppSource. We have a support portal. If you hit our binary stream website on the company website, where you can jump in and gather more information, more videos. I mean, there's a huge resource of information there. I really, again, appreciate you guys taking the time today to spend some time learning a bit more about subscription billing. And with that, you guys have a great rest of your day. Take care.